Boy, this is really humbling. My whole life, I guess I kind of dreamed of this. And I never thought it would come true like this. I always had, when I started hockey, I started like most of you know now, I was born in Canada, and that's where I learned the game. I was very fortunate that my dad was able to impart everything that I knew about the game and have that kind of access to the sport that I had. All the players that he played with, I was just a little kid growing up, and I was always at my dad's footsteps. He was an NHL hockey player for a couple of years, and he got sent down to the minors. I remember he told me he was sent down for 2 weeks. Well, it turned into 13 years with Buffalo, and it wasn't Jackie Parker or Ben Smith either. It was, and that's what happened to my dad. So he got stuck in Buffalo, New York, which is a great place for us to learn how to play hockey. My brothers, Randy, and unfortunately my brother Brad can't be here, but that's where we learned to play and skate. We were always in our father's footsteps. He always was inclusive to everything that he did. We did too. My dad took a nap, we took a nap. It was a lot of fun. Well, we got a lot of naps in, I can tell you that. When he went to the rink, when he we lived in Fort Erie, which is where everybody at that time lived in when they played for Buffalo, because of the exchange rate and everything. It was a lot better to be living in Canada than it was in the United States. So we crossed the border. Well, my dad would go to the rink at whatever time usually 4:30 or 5 o'clock for a 7:30 game, and his three boys would come along with him. He always had the three caddies. My brothers and I would go to the rink. We would be wearing our suits and everything, and we'd play tape hockey in the hallway. Or, my dad would say, you guys hang out here before the game, and then you got to sit in your seats and watch the game. Well, we watched the game, but we couldn't care. All we wanted to do was play that little ball hockey and tape hockey. And then when my dad got to a certain age, when he ended up having a great career in Buffalo, he decided he had to start to get into coaching, and the opportunity came for him to move to the United States. So he coached in Dayton, Ohio. That's where really I got my start really in playing for USA Hockey and the Dayton Amateur Hockey Association. That's a long time ago, actually, when I think back on it now. So I got to play and do a lot of things. I was as big as I was at probably 13 years old, and I had Brad and I had Randy. They were two little monkeys that I used to have to hang around with. They played a different game than I played, but I was always trying to be my dad. And I wanted to be a center iceman, and that's what I was learning to play all the way through the 2 years in Dayton. And then we moved to Rhode Island, which was a big change for us. My dad got the job in Providence in the American Hockey League. So we moved to Providence, and that's really where I got my start in terms of becoming, I turned into a defenseman, because when I was 13, 14 years old, when I was starting in high school, I was a centerman on our hockey team. We had a pretty good hockey team. We weren't like a lot of kids who all went to Mount St. Charles and LaSalle and things like that. My dad said, no, you guys go play at East Providence. East Providence, the year before we got there, he didn't win a game. But we looked at it like, we'll go to this team and we'll make them good. We'll make them a good team. And that's exactly what we did. But that first team that I played on with, my coach was Joe Sprague. He was very inspirational in my life. And we got through the regular season. I was still playing center, and I thought I was going to be my dad. although I was a right-hand shot, he was always left-handed, so that was the fortunate thing for me. I always got everything was brand new. My brothers had to live with hand-me-downs. I think I became right-handed just to be so I could get new things all the time, which I did. So then one day we were in the playoffs when I was in high school, and a couple of our high school, they got in a car accident on the day of the first playoff game. So Joe Sprague, and to me it was brilliant what he said. Ron, why don't you play defense? And I'll get you to play a little bit more than you do playing center ice. So he turned me into a defenseman. And at the time, that's when Bobby Orr was really big. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Play defense? He said, well, you do it, you'll be fine. Well, what he ended up doing was he created Ron Wilson, the star athlete defenseman, and I could stay on the ice all the time. I didn't have to come off the ice, and then boom, we still lost the game 6-2, but we went from getting like 20 shots on goal to ended up getting 40 shots on goal, and against us it was only like we got beat, but we only gave up 20 shots, so it was a total difference. That was the biggest break in my high school career, was becoming a defenseman. And that lasted for a couple of years, and then fortunately, that's where Lou Lamoriello came into my life. I always wanted to go to or be. When I was a kid, I would go play for anybody, and Lou made a promise to me that you just come to school, we'll build the rink, which eventually Providence College did. They built Schneider Arena, so they created a place where I could go and play. And if it wasn't for Providence College, I don't know if I would have had the kind of career that I did. I could have gone to BU. I could have gone to Harvard. I remember I thought I'd go to Harvard, Brown, Yale, one of the Ivy League schools, and I was accepted at all those schools. And everybody always asked me, why'd you go to Providence College? Well, for some reason, I was smart enough as a kid to realize that Lou Lamoriello had really what it took to be a coach. He had curfews and a lot of things that everybody always criticized me for. Why do you want to go play for Lou Lamoriello? You're going to have, we ended up having curfews. He had the schedule rigged, so we went to bed every night, 2 nights before a game. It was a lot of fun, but it wasn't a big deal to me, but it was a big deal to a lot of the guys I played with, I can tell you that. But at Providence, the great thing about Lou Lamoriello, he was a very disciplined coach, but he allowed me to play the game that I was blessed with. I could skate and I could stick handle, I could score goals, I could do pretty much whatever I wanted except beat BU in the end. I couldn't beat BU because of Jackie Parker. But we had a lot of fun at Providence. Well, that ended up making my college career complete, going to Providence College. I became a professional player. I played in Toronto, and I thought I had a really great career. And then after 3 years of bouncing around like a toilet seat, like my dad was when he was a player, I just got sick of it, and I had an opportunity to go to Switzerland. A lot of people frowned on it, but Switzerland was the best thing that I ever did. I went over there and I ended up playing in Switzerland for the next 6 years. But while I was in Switzerland, that's when Brian Burke became an agent. He actually, I was playing in Switzerland and he made a deal. I didn't have any idea that he did this. He made a deal for me to come back and play with the Minnesota North Stars. So, he called me one time. He was trying to call me. We won a championship. I actually played with my brother Randy in Davos, but then Randy's nemesis came and joined me. Randy went to Bern, and I ended up with Lance Nethery, and that's another story altogether. Lance Nethery had scored a big playoff goal against Providence College. It prevented Providence College 2 years later from advancing to Boston Garden ECAC finals, but that's another story. I could stand here and tell you 1,000 stories, but my first chance with I was still a Canadian. But when I actually had left Providence College, it was my good friend Art Berglund who saw. That's back when the U.S. didn't have many good hockey players. We had we had decent college players, but Art had the idea, right, well, why don't you become an American? So I said, sure, I don't want to be a Canadian anymore. So thanks to Art, well, actually, it took me 3 weeks to become an American citizen. I'll never forget it. And I got to play for Bob Johnson in the 1975 World Championships, which was interesting because that was the year we went 0-10 in the World Championships, if you can believe that. But I remember we played the Russians. I scored a goal. It was a big thrill at that time. But I've got a career. I eventually, actually, after going and playing in Minnesota for 2 years, I had the opportunity to go back to Switzerland. That's where I finished my career. And I actually, the 1 year I was playing in Zurich in Switzerland, and the team that I played for at one point, Davos, was going to fire their coach. So I went up to Davos one weekend, and I said, I really can't stand playing in Zurich. If you want to fire your coach, go ahead. I'll be here. I'm ready to coach. And I'd always had. So the president of the team offered me the job. So I signed. I ended up quitting hockey altogether. And I became a coach, and the rest is kind of history. But the coaching part, I coached the rest of the year in Davos, and I was basically ready to get out and get a real job, as they say. I was training to be a stockbroker. I didn't want to be a stockbroker, but I couldn't think of anything that I could do that I was really qualified to do. And it scared me enough. But Brian Burke was at the time, he'd become an assistant general manager in Vancouver, and he actually offered me the job as assistant coach in Milwaukee, their minor league team. So that's where I really got my start in coaching. And I remember the first interview I had with Pat Quinn. I was the day before I'll never forget this. The day before the interview, I went to a batting cage with my daughter, Kristen, and I get in the batting cage. It's just me in the batting cage, and the ball's coming, and I fouled it off, and wouldn't you know, the ball goes off the plate, comes up and hits me right in the eye. So I end up with a big cut under the eye and over the eye. So Pat Quinn didn't really know me from a hole in the wall. So the first time I met Pat Quinn, he was the general manager and eventually the coach of Vancouver. He asked me, what happened to your face? And I said, well, you should see the other guy. I just lied completely. And well, anyway, I made an impression on Pat that I had what it takes to coach. And that's what I ended up doing. It was really just a softball accident, really. And well, because of Brian's involvement with Vancouver, I eventually became an assistant coach to Pat Quinn, and that's where I started my coaching career. I worked for 3 years for Pat Quinn, and through the luck of the draw, that's when the Mighty Ducks came into existence, and I decided to try and throw my hat into the ring. Pat was totally disagreeing with me. You can't go to Anaheim. That would be the worst thing you ever did in your career. Because like most expansion teams, he thought we'd be losers for a long time. I'd be able to coach the Anaheim Ducks. I'd be fine. But then I'd be just thrown away. Well, I told Pat that I really believed in myself. What was his plan when he took over in Vancouver? And he said, well, you had to have a 5-year contract. That's my game plan. You have to have a 5-year contract. All I didn't get a 5-year contract. I got a 2-year contract to go in and try to coach Anaheim and do the best that I could. At that time, that's when we ended up with we drafted Paul Curry, and that was the best player that we could ever get at that point. And Paul was outstanding as a hockey player. He didn't play the first year I was in Anaheim, but the second year he came in and he really made a difference. He just got inducted into the actual NHL Hall of Fame, and it was great to see he and Teemu Selanne, who we picked up later on when I was 2 years. Well, I spent a couple years in Anaheim, which was really rewarding. And the last year I ended up getting fired, but that's a story for another day. We made the playoffs. We got beat in the first round, actually the second round. We got beat by Detroit in the second round, but we still made the playoffs. But I ended up getting fired. I had to apply for some other coaching jobs. I was starting to build a reputation. I was fortunate that George McPhee decided to hire me in Washington, so I went to Washington. That was a great experience too. I got you saw the pictures I had Ole Kolzig in goal, Peter Bondra, a lot of good players I got to play with or coach with. I didn't play with those guys, but I wish I could. And then after 5 years in Washington, the San Jose Sharks job was available. I've been fired by Washington along the way. But I got to go to San Jose, and that was really a lot of fun. We ended up doing a lot of good things in San Jose. I recently coached in Toronto, and that was too much. An American coaching, an American who's really Canadian, they didn't really want to hear that, but I did throw that out at them. In fact, I still have 2 passports. So I remember when I got hired, I opened the press conference, I put the 2 passports down. I'm whatever you guys want me to be. So along the way, I coached in the '96 team, and that was really a lot of fun. Scotty Young, who was on that team, he goes, everybody says he was an underdog, but I remember really quietly, he was one of our best players, because I always said he had to play with Brett Hull. That was really tough. That was a sorry. Okay, I have 2 good players. He played Dougie Wade and Brett Hull, and then you've got to do all the back checking, Scotty. That's what an underrated player means. He does all the back checking. But he did everything right, and he helped us win. That was the important thing. But I remember when I got to coach that team, Lou Lamoriello decided to hire me, and he said, Ron, actually, before the whole thing started, I had to prove a point to Lou. Lou didn't really, he said to me, we had a meeting, it was Paul Holmgren, myself, and John Cuniff were at the meeting. They were my assistant coaches. And Lou asked me what I was going to say at the first meeting I was going to have with the team. Louis wanted me to write it down. I couldn't write it down. And then Louis basically yelling at me like I was still a player. I said, Louis, so I kicked the other 2 assistant coaches out. Could you guys wait outside for 5 minutes? And they went out, and I said, Lou, you have to trust me. You hired me as this coach. I can't tell you what I'm going to say until I actually sit down with this team and I am in the room. I'll know what to say. You have to trust me. So, and the whole thing with the U.S. team in '96 was I realized being a Canadian deep down, what it means to be a hockey player in the NHL. And I knew that most of the American guys I played with, they didn't have the same heart or character to win or win at all costs. So with guys like Chris Chelios, Brian Leach, Brett Hull, for me, I just needed to put in them a belief that they could do whatever they believed they could do, that they were better than actually all the Canadian guys that they were going to be going up against. And so I guess I managed to do that because we did a lot of things together, but the most important thing was getting those guys to believe in what I was selling them. So I remember, actually, Kevin Collins remembers this, was we ended up playing Canada in the finals. The first game, well, we ended up losing in overtime. I remember I came in after the game, I was really down, and then Brian Burke, who was working in the league office, he came down, he said, listen, you better not, Kevin Collins made the mistake on that overtime goal. There was 2 feet offside. I was going, what are you talking about, Berkey? So we sat down, he's played the replay. I noticed that tonight you're wearing glasses. I wish you wore those glasses when you were a linesman. So Berkey pointed out, so I went out and I remember saying to the press after the game, I don't care that the goal was offside. We didn't deserve to win the game. We didn't do all the little things that it would take to win a game like that. So I guess because of Brian Burke, I let you off the hook. I never did. But that was it for Kevin. Kevin, I don't think refereed any more games. But the next year at the start of the season when I was coaching Washington, when I had the first time I seen Kevin, he comes skating by. I said, "You still owe me 2 feet, you bastard." Well, Kevin, I mean, his integrity was really good. He didn't ever give me the 2 feet. In fact, he still owes me. But I remember when we in that game, you don't see it so much on TV. But I remember the final game being in Canada was a really huge deal. We were playing in Bell Center in Montreal. We opened that building. The place is packed except there was one section of our team and of our fans and everything. My wife was leading the charge, Maureen. She was wrapped in a flag there. They went nuts. Well, the game was really close. I remember predicting to our team. I said to Tony Amonte in the pregame skate, I said, Tony, you're going to be our Mike Eruzione. He says, what are you talking about, Ron? I said, well, you're 2 things. You're ugly and you went to BU. So I said this to him and he couldn't believe it. I said, you just wait, you'll score the winning goal tonight. Well, wouldn't you? It came down to, the first was Brett Hull. He scored the high deflection. We could see it. I was right in line with the puck. We could see that it was going to count, but that's the first time they used replay. So they used to replay. So we're all sitting on the bench and everybody's like, what the heck's going on? I said, oh, this is going to count unless the NHL's as rigged as the people say it was. It wasn't, though. Terry Gregson was the referee. I remember he was scared. And so I said, Brett, don't just hold. We'll get to celebrate this twice when they count the goal. So the goal is scored, and then Terry Gregson points to center ice, and it was good. So we got that one. And then like 20 seconds later, Tony Amonte, it was a real, he passed it out to the point. It was to Darian Hatcher. Darian Hatcher shoots one. The rebound comes out to Tony. It kind of looks a little bit like Tony might have kicked it. He probably did. But you really couldn't tell on when they showed the replay. So we're waiting. I said, Tony, this is going to count. And so we're standing on the bench. And it's the highest I ever saw John Conniff, rest his soul, ever jump. it was on the bench when they counted that goal because it was a winning goal for the World Cup. We still had to play 2 or 3 minutes, but it was really incredible because we had a lot of things going on. But at the end of the night, we ended up scoring a couple more goals, and the rest is history. We won the World Cup in Montreal. The guys had a great time. It was a lot of fun for everybody. It was probably the greatest win the U.S. ever had since the 1980 Olympic team. But this time it really counted. It was for real. So our players all deserved the highest praise you could possibly give them. And I was just glad that I was there to be a part of that. I'd like to thank I'm hearing guys talk about they've been married for 30 years or 40 years. I'm actually, next week it's going to be my 41st wedding anniversary. You talk about loyalty. My high school sweetheart, it was in high school, Maureen, that we met. And, well, that was 41 years ago. Actually, yeah, just about now. It was December 18th, 1976, we got married. It was the greatest moment of my life, and you're still there. This last year's been hell for you. I suffered a stroke a week after the Hall of Fame dinner last year, and it turned my life upside down. I remember one day I woke up and I threw up. I thought I just had the flu. Well, that was what I thought. The doctor was different. He said, "Ron, you've suffered a stroke." I said, "A stroke?" Well, I had to go to the hospital. And it was really then that I knew, I thought my life was over, basically. But because of my wife, Maureen, and especially my 2 daughters, Kristen and Lauren, I've been able to recover to the point like I'm like this. I can at least stand here and make a fool of myself. Tonight I've got also my 2 granddaughters here, Kingsley and Riley. They're here. They're not hockey players. That's the one thing I always regretted, is that my daughters, who are pretty athletic, never played hockey. I just didn't believe that girls should play hockey. Although, what did I know, right? But it's been a lot of fun to have this honor, and I know my brothers are very proud too. And I want to say it's been just an honor to stand here and tell a few tales from my hockey past. But I just want to thank everybody for your attention. Thank you.